The first gunshot echoed across Benton, Arkansas, sending a flock of startled crows into the morning sky as Katherine Andrews clutched her wedding dress, her trembling fingers leaving creases in the white satin. She had known her past would catch up to her eventually, but not today, not on her wedding day. It was June 1875, and the small church at the edge of town stood as a beacon of hope amid the dust and desperation of the western frontier. Katherine Kate, to those who knew her well, had traveled a hard road to reach this moment. 3 years working as a schoolteacher in Benton had finally given her something she'd never had before: a home, respect, and the love of Harrison Zeller, the quiet cattle rancher whose gentle ways had slowly broken down the walls around her heart. The second gunshot came closer, followed by angry shouts that sent the wedding guests scrambling for cover. Through the stained glass windows, Kate could make out 3 riders approaching, their silhouettes unmistakable even at a distance. "They found me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the panicked murmurs filling the church. Reverend Thomas gripped his Bible tighter. "Who are these men, Miss Andrews?" Kate's eyes darted toward the church entrance. "Men I hope never to see again." The doors burst open, flooding the dim sanctuary with harsh sunlight. 3 men stood in the doorway, dust-covered and armed, their expressions a mixture of triumph and malice. "There you are, Katie girl," said the tallest of the 3, a man with a ragged scar running down his cheek. "Thought you could just disappear on us." Kate instinctively stepped back, bumping into the altar behind her. The wedding guests, mostly townsfolk who had come to respect the young schoolteacher, watched in horrified silence. "I don't know what you want, Silas, but you need to leave," Kate said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. Silas Tucker laughed, the sound echoing off the church walls. "Oh, I think you know exactly what we want. Your father had something that belongs to us, and seeing as he's dead, that debt falls to you." Before Kate could respond, a tall figure stepped between her and the intruders. Harrison Zeller, dressed in his finest suit with his ever-present Stetson in hand, positioned himself squarely in the doorway. "She stays," he said, his voice quiet but firm. The church fell silent as the 3 men sized up the rancher blocking their path. At 32, Harrison was lean but strong, his sun-weathered face betraying little emotion even as his hand hovered near the revolver at his hip, a weapon he had hoped not to need on his wedding day. "This doesn't concern you, Cowboy," Silas said, his hand resting on his holstered gun. "Step aside." Harrison didn't move. "Whatever business you think you have with Katherine, you can discuss it with me. But not today, and not by barging into a church with guns drawn." The shortest of the 3 men, a wiry, nervous-looking fellow with a patchy beard, stepped forward. "Listen here, we rode for 3 weeks tracking this woman. We ain't leaving without what's owed." 3 weeks or 3 years makes no difference to me," Harrison replied evenly. "The lady stays." The 3rd man, who had remained silent until now, suddenly drew his pistol. "Enough talk." What happened next unfolded in seconds. Harrison kicked the church door shut with his boot, the heavy wood slamming into the armed man's wrist. A shot fired wildly into the ceiling as the gun clattered to the floor. Outside, the men began pounding on the door, their threats muffled by the thick oak. Harrison turned to the stunned wedding guests. "Sheriff Daniels," he called to a gray-haired man in the front pew, "would you mind handling this situation?" The sheriff nodded grimly and motioned for several men to follow him toward the side exit. Kate stood frozen by the altar, her wedding dress gathering dust from the commotion. Harrison crossed to her in 3 long strides. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, his blue eyes searching her face. "I'm so sorry," Kate whispered, tears threatening to spill. "I should have told you about my past, but I was afraid. Harrison gently took her hands in his. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. Outside, they could hear the sheriff's authoritative voice commanding the men to drop their weapons. More voices joined in, townspeople coming to investigate the disturbance. "Who are they, Kate?" Harrison asked. Kate took a deep breath. "Former associates of my father. He was a con man, Harrison. Those men believe he cheated them out of money from a scheme he ran before he died. They think I have it, or that I know where it's hidden." Harrison's expression remained unchanged. "And do you?" "No," Kate said firmly. "I left that life behind when my father died. I took what little honest money I had and came west to start over. Everything I've told you about myself since arriving in Benton has been the truth." A commotion outside indicated that the sheriff had the situation under control. Reverend Thomas approached them cautiously. "Should we proceed with the ceremony?" he asked uncertainly. Harrison looked to Kate, the question in his eyes clear. "I understand if you want to call this off," she said, voice trembling. "Those men won't give up easily. Being tied to me will only bring you trouble." Harrison smiled for the first time since the interruption. "I didn't stand in that doorway because I was afraid of losing my bride to other men, Kate. I did it because you're worth fighting for." The church doors opened again, this time revealing Sheriff Daniels. "Got those troublemakers locked up for now," he announced. "But they're demanding to speak with you, Miss Andrews." Kate nodded. "I'll talk to them after the ceremony." Harrison raised an eyebrow. "You still want to go through with it, more than ever," Kate replied, squeezing his hands. "If you'll still have me." "In that case," Harrison said, replacing his hat on the rack by the door, "I believe we were about to make some promises to each other." The wedding resumed, though with a considerably more subdued atmosphere. The guests whispered among themselves as Kate and Harrison exchanged vows, wondering about the mysterious past of their town schoolteacher. But as the couple sealed their union with a kiss, a sense of resolute calm seemed to settle over them both. Whatever storm was coming, they would weather it together. After the ceremony, Kate changed out of her wedding dress into a simpler blue gown. She and Harrison made their way to the jailhouse, where Sheriff Daniels had the three men locked in separate cells. "Well, well," Silas called as they entered. "If it isn't the blushing bride." Kate approached the cell bars, Harrison close behind her. "Say what you have to say, Silas." "Your father took $15,000 from us," Silas said bluntly. "Money we earned together on the Hammond job." "My father died with nothing," Kate replied. "Whatever he took from you, it's gone." The wiry man in the next cell spat on the floor. "That's a lie. Jacob Andrews was too clever to just lose that kind of money. He must have hidden it somewhere, told you where to find it." Kate shook her head. "The only thing my father left me was a trunk of clothes and debts I couldn't pay. That's why I came west." "What were you planning to do if you found her?" Harrison asked, his voice deceptively casual. Silas smiled coldly. "Take what's ours, one way or another." Harrison stepped forward, his presence filling the small jailhouse. "Let me make something clear. Katherine is my wife now. Whatever grievance you think you have with her ends today." "Or what, Cowboy?" challenged the third man, nursing his bruised wrist. "Or you'll face charges not just for disturbing the peace, but for attempted kidnapping," interjected Sheriff Daniels from his desk. "That'll get you boys a nice long stay at the territorial prison." A tense silence followed. Finally, Silas spoke again, his voice lower. "We know about the map, Katie. Your father bragged about it before he disappeared, said it was his insurance policy." Kate stared at him, genuine confusion on her face. "What map?" "The map to where he buried the real treasure," said the wiry man eagerly. "Not just our 15,000, but everything he'd taken over the years. He said he'd hidden it all in a place only his blood could find." Kate turned to Harrison, bewilderment in her eyes. "I don't know anything about any map or treasure." Harrison studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "I believe you." He turned back to the imprisoned men. "You've wasted your time coming here. There's no map, no treasure. Just a woman who's worked hard to build an honest life." Silas laughed bitterly. "You're a fool if you believe that. Once an Andrews, always an Andrews. Con artistry runs in the blood." Kate flinched at the words, but Harrison's expression remained impassive. "Sheriff, how long can you hold these men, disturbing a church service, threatening folks with firearms?" "I can keep them at least a week before the circuit judge comes through," Sheriff Daniels replied. Harrison nodded. "That should give us time." "Time for what?" Kate asked as they left the jailhouse. "To figure out what they're really after," Harrison replied, helping her onto his horse, "and to keep you safe in the meantime." Instead of heading to the small house Harrison had prepared for them in town, their intended first home as a married couple, they rode toward his ranch outside Benton. As they traveled, Kate told him everything about growing up with a father who moved from town to town, always one step ahead of the law, about learning to read marks and run simple cons before she was 12, about how her father's death had finally given her the chance to escape that life. "I wanted to tell you," she said, her arms wrapped around his waist as they rode, "but I was afraid you wouldn't want me if you knew." Harrison was quiet for a long moment. "My father was a drunk who beat my mother until the day he died," he finally said. "We all have pasts we didn't choose, Kate. It's what we do with our futures that matters." The Zeller ranch came into view as the sun began to set, a modest but well-kept property with a main house, a barn and grazing land stretching toward the horizon. Two ranch hands looked up in surprise as they approached. They hadn't expected the boss back on his wedding night. "Everything all right, Mr. Zeller?" called one of the men, a weathered cowboy named Frank who had worked for Harrison since he first established the ranch 5 years earlier. "Change of plans," Harrison replied, helping Kate dismount. "Would you mind riding into town and letting Mrs. Decker know we won't be staying at the house tonight, and ask her to bring some of Catherine's things out to the ranch tomorrow?" Frank nodded, though his curious gaze lingered on Kate's simple traveling dress, so different from the wedding gown he'd seen her in earlier that day. Inside the ranch house, Kate stood awkwardly in the main room, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of their situation. This was supposed to be a day of celebration, the start of a new life together. Instead, her past had crashed into the present in the worst possible way. "I've ruined everything," she said softly. Harrison, who had been lighting the lamps, turned to her. "Nothing's ruined, Kate. Delayed, maybe. Complicated, certainly, but not ruined. Those men won't give up," she warned. "Silas Tucker has held grudges for decades. He was my father's partner for years before they had a falling out." "Then we'll deal with him," Harrison said simply. He crossed to a cabinet and pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "But first, I believe we're supposed to be celebrating." He poured a small amount in each glass and handed one to Kate. "To my wife," he said, raising his glass. "The most surprising, confounding, and courageous woman I've ever met." Despite everything, Kate smiled. "To my husband, the first man who ever stood between me and danger instead of causing it." They drank, and for a moment, the warmth of the whiskey and the look in Harrison's eyes made Kate believe that perhaps everything would turn out all right. But as night settled over the ranch, her father's words came back to her, words he'd spoken on his deathbed, delirious with fever. "The only treasure worth having is the one that can't be spent, Katie girl. Remember that when the time comes." At the time, she dismissed it as the ramblings of a dying man. Now, she wasn't so sure. Morning came with the crowing of a rooster and the soft sounds of the ranch waking up. Kate opened her eyes to find Harrison already dressed, watching her from a chair near the window. "You're staring," she said, pulling the quilt up to her chin with sudden shyness. "I'm wondering," he corrected, "how I managed to convince the prettiest schoolteacher in Arkansas to marry a simple cattle rancher." Kate smiled, some of her anxiety from the previous day fading in the warm morning light. "There's nothing simple about you, Harrison Zeller." He returned her smile, then grew serious. "We need to talk about what happens next. Those men will be out of jail in a week." Kate sat up, keeping the quilt wrapped around her. "I've been thinking about what Silas said, about a map." "Do you think there could be any truth to it?" Kate hesitated. "My father was many things, but he wasn't careless with money. If he had managed to accumulate a significant amount, he wouldn't have simply lost it. And he did say something strange before he died." She repeated his deathbed words to Harrison, who listened thoughtfully. "The only treasure worth having is the one that can't be spent," he echoed. "What do you think he meant?" "I'm not sure," Kate admitted. "But there might be a clue in the trunk I brought with me from St. Louis. It's all I have left of him." "The trunk in your boarding house room," Kate nodded. "Mrs. Decker is bringing my things today, remember. We can look through it together." Harrison rose from his chair. "In the meantime, I need to check on the herd with the men. Will you be all right here alone for a few hours?" "I grew up learning to take care of myself," Kate assured him. "I'll be fine." After Harrison left, Kate explored the ranch house that was now her home. It was larger than she had expected, with a spacious kitchen, a sitting room with bookshelves, and 2 additional bedrooms beyond the main one. Everything was simple but well crafted, reflecting Harrison's practical nature. She was in the kitchen preparing coffee when she heard a horse approaching. Looking out the window, she expected to see Mrs. Decker arriving with her belongings. Instead, she saw a lone rider she didn't recognize, a woman on a spotted mare, dressed in riding clothes that had seen better days. Kate cautiously opened the door as the woman dismounted. "You must be the new Mrs. Zeller," the stranger said, removing her hat to reveal a cascade of auburn hair streaked with gray. "I'm Olive Townsend. I own the neighboring property." "Katherine Zeller," Kate replied, extending her hand. "Would you like to come in for coffee?" Olive studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I heard there was some trouble at your wedding yesterday. News travels fast around here." Inside, as Kate poured coffee for them both, Olive continued, "Harrison's a good man, best neighbor a widow could ask for. He's helped me keep my place running since my Edward passed 3 years ago." "I'm sorry for your loss," Kate said sincerely. Olive waved away the sympathy. "Life out here doesn't leave much time for grieving. You adapt or you perish." She took a sip of coffee. "So, those men who came for you, they planning to return?" Kate nearly dropped her cup. "How did you like I said, news travels. My ranch hand Percy was in town when it happened. Said they were looking for something they thought you had." Kate hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to this stranger. But there was something direct and trustworthy about Olive Townsend that made deception seem both difficult and unnecessary. "They worked with my father," Kate admitted. "They think he hid money somewhere and that I know where it is." Olive nodded thoughtfully. "And do you?" "No. At least, I don't think so. But they mentioned a map, and my father did say something cryptic before he died." Olive leaned forward. "In my experience, men like that don't give up easily. If they think you have something they want, they'll be back with or without the sheriff's permission." "What would you suggest?" "Find whatever they're looking for before they do," Olive said simply. "Or convince them beyond doubt that it doesn't exist." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Decker, the kindly widow who had run Kate's boarding house in town. She arrived in a wagon with Kate's trunk and other belongings. full of questions about the wedding day disruption that Kate carefully deflected. After Mrs. Decker and Olive had both left, Kate opened the trunk that contained the remnants of her former life. On top were her teaching materials and the few dresses she owned. Beneath those lay older items, a faded daguerreotype of her mother who had died when Kate was just 4, a small collection of books, and at the very bottom, wrapped in an old shirt, her father's pocket watch and a leather-bound journal she had never been able to bring herself to read. Kate ran her fingers over the journal's worn cover. Jacob Andrews had carried it everywhere in his final years, though she had never seen him write in it. She had assumed it contained records of his cons, names of marks he'd fleeced, things she had wanted no part of in her new life. But now, she carefully opened it, surprised to find that most of the pages were indeed blank. Only the first few contained writing her father's flowing script that had always seemed too elegant for a man of his rough character. The entries were dated from 15 years earlier and appeared to be a straightforward accounting of expenses and earnings. But as Kate read further, she noticed something odd. References to the special account and Kate's future appeared repeatedly. With a jolt, she realized that Kay must refer to her Katherine. The final entry, dated just before her 10th birthday, read, "Deposited final amount today. Map secured in the only place that matters. When she's ready, the treasure will be waiting." Kate stared at the words, her heart pounding. There was a map after all, but where had her father hidden it? And what exactly did it lead to? She was still pondering these questions when Harrison returned in the late afternoon. She showed him the journal and its cryptic final entry. "The only place that matters," Harrison mused, reading the words again. "Any idea what that might refer to?" Kate shook her head. "My father and I moved so often there wasn't any place that held special meaning. Unless—" A memory surfaced, her father teaching her to play cards, laughing as she struggled to shuffle the oversized deck with her small hands. "He always said I was his good luck charm, that as long as I was with him, he couldn't lose." "The map could be hidden somewhere on your person," Harrison suggested. "Something you've carried with you all these years without realizing its significance." Kate's hand went to the small locket around her neck, the only piece of jewelry she owned, containing a tiny portrait of her mother. "This was my mother's. My father gave it to me on my 10th birthday. I've never taken it off." With trembling fingers, she removed the locket and examined it closely. The silver oval appeared ordinary enough, but when she pressed the small catch that normally opened it to reveal the portrait, nothing happened. "It stuck," she said, frowning. Harrison held out his hand. "May I?" He examined the locket carefully, then reached for his pocket knife. "There's a seam here that doesn't match the rest of the design," he said, gently working the blade into an almost invisible line along the locket's edge. With a soft click, the back panel of the locket came loose, revealing not the expected portrait, but a tightly folded piece of paper. Kate gasped. "It was there all along. I've been wearing it for 15 years without knowing." Carefully, they unfolded the paper. It wasn't a map in the traditional sense, but a series of numbers and what appeared to be banking information. "Merchants Bank of St. Louis," Harrison read. "Account number 7239. Password, Katharina." "My mother's full name," Kate whispered. "Your father wasn't hiding treasure in the ground," Harrison said slowly. "He was banking it for you." The implication stunned Kate. Her father, the man she had known only as a grifter and con artist, had apparently been saving money for her future all along. "But why didn't he tell me?" she asked. "Why let me believe we were always one step away from ruin?" "Perhaps he wanted to protect you," Harrison suggested. "If others knew about the account, you would have been in danger, like you are now." Kate looked up sharply. "Silas must have suspected something like this. That's why he's so determined to find me after all these years. The question is, what do we do now?" Harrison said, refolding the paper carefully. "This account could contain a significant amount of money if your father was adding to it regularly. Money that rightfully belongs to the people he cheated," Kate said firmly, "including Silas and his men." Harrison studied her face. "You want to return it?" "Not to Silas," Kate clarified. "He's no better than my father was. But yes, I want to make amends where possible. I've spent 3 years trying to build an honest life, Harrison. I can't build our future on stolen money." Harrison took her hand, his expression warm with pride. "Then we'll find a way to make it right." The next morning, they rode into Benton together to visit the telegraph office. Kate sent a message to the Merchants' Bank in St. Louis, inquiring about the account and requesting confirmation of the balance. While waiting for a reply, they visited Sheriff Daniels to check on the prisoners. "They've been quiet," the sheriff reported. "Too quiet if you ask me, like they're biding their time. Has anyone come to visit them?" Harrison asked. The sheriff shook his head. "Not a soul. Though I did catch the wiry one calls himself Maddox trying to bribe my deputy to deliver a message yesterday." "What kind of message?" Kate asked, suddenly alert. "Wouldn't say." "Offered poor Jenkins $5 just to take a note to the post office." Harrison and Kate exchanged concerned glances. "They might have others working with them," Harrison said as they left the sheriff's office. "People we haven't seen yet." "Or they're trying to get word to someone about what they've learned," Kate added. "If Silas suspects I know about the account, he might try to beat us to St. Louis." Their fears were confirmed when they returned to the telegraph office later that day. A reply had arrived from the bank. Account 7239 active. Balance substantial. Recent inquiry received from individual claiming to be account holder. Require in-person verification with password and proper identification. "Someone's already contacted them," Kate said, her stomach sinking. "It has to be connected to Silas." Harrison nodded grimly. "We need to get to St. Louis before they do." The journey to St. Louis would take at least a week by train from Little Rock. They made hasty preparations, with Harrison leaving his ranch in the capable hands of his foreman, and Kate arranging for a substitute teacher to take her classes. Olive Townsend appeared at the ranch as they were preparing to depart. "Heard you were making a sudden trip east," she said without preamble. "Thought you might need this." She handed Harrison a small Derringer pistol. "For the lady. Sometimes a woman needs protection when her husband isn't looking." Kate accepted the weapon with thanks, tucking it into her traveling bag. "Be careful," Olive warned. "Men like the ones you're dealing with don't play by civilized rules." They left before dawn the next day, taking a stagecoach to Little Rock where they could catch the train to St. Louis. The coach was crowded, carrying a family of settlers, a traveling salesman, and a quiet man in clerical clothing who introduced himself as Brother Timothy, bound for a mission in Memphis. Kate was on edge throughout the journey, studying each face they encountered for signs of recognition or threat. By the time they reached Little Rock and boarded the eastbound train, she was exhausted from vigilance. Their compartment on the train was small but private. As the Arkansas countryside rolled past the window, Kate finally allowed herself to relax slightly. "What will we do when we reach St. Louis?" she asked Harrison, who sat beside her, his hat on his knee. "First, we secure the account," he said. "Then we decide how best to use the money. If your father really was setting it aside for your future, perhaps some of it could help us expand the ranch." Kate shook her head. "I meant what I said about not building our life on dishonest money. But perhaps we could use a portion to help others establish a school fund for children who can't afford an education." Harrison smiled. "You're a remarkable woman, Katherine Zeller." The tenderness in his voice made her blush. Despite the rushed nature of their departure and the circumstances that had precipitated it, this was, in a sense, their wedding journey. Yet they had hardly had a moment alone since exchanging vows. As if reading her thoughts, Harrison took her hand. "When this is all settled, I promise you the honeymoon you deserve, perhaps New Orleans or even San Francisco." "I don't need grand cities," Kate said softly. "Just time with you without looking over my shoulder for ghosts from my past." Harrison's reply was interrupted by a knock at their compartment door. A porter stood outside, holding a telegram. "Message for Mrs. Zeller," he announced, handing over the envelope. Kate opened it with trembling fingers. "Arrived St. Louis stop account secured stop don't bother coming stop regards S. Silas," Kate breathed. "He's already there. He must have had someone waiting to help him escape." Harrison's jaw tightened. The message could be a bluff, meant to discourage us from coming. "Or he could already have the money," Kate said, distress evident in her voice. "All those years my father saved, gone just like that." "We continue to St. Louis," Harrison decided. "Bluff or not, we need to know the truth." The remainder of the journey passed in tense anticipation. Kate found herself going over every interaction with her father in those final months, searching for clues she might have missed. Had he tried to tell her about the account in his own cryptic way? Had she been too eager to escape his shadow to listen? St. Louis greeted them with the clamor and bustle that Kate remembered from her childhood visits. The city had grown even larger in the years she'd been away. The riverfront teeming with steamboats and the streets crowded with carriages and pedestrians. They took a hansom cab directly to the Merchants' Bank, an imposing stone building in the financial district. Inside, Kate approached a teller, the folded paper from her locket clutched tightly in her hand. "I need to inquire about an account," she said. "Number 7239 in the name of Jacob Andrews." The teller's eyebrows rose slightly. "One moment, please." He disappeared into a back office, returning moments later with an older gentleman in a tailored suit. "I'm Mr. Whitman, the bank manager," the man said. "May I ask who is inquiring about this particular account?" "I'm Katherine Zeller, Katherine Andrews before my marriage. Jacob Andrews was my father." Mr. Whitman studied her carefully. "We've had several inquiries about this account recently. Do you have any identification?" Kate produced the locket and the journal, explaining their significance. "I also know the password my father established, Katharina, my mother's name." Mr. Whitman nodded slowly. "Please come to my office, both of you." In the privacy of the wood-paneled room, Mr. Whitman revealed the full story. "Your father opened this account 15 years ago, with explicit instructions that it was to be held in trust for you until you reached the age of 21 or came to claim it yourself with the password. He made regular deposits, sometimes substantial ones. And the account is still active?" Harrison asked. "No one has withdrawn funds recently?" "Oh, there was an attempt," Mr. Whitman confirmed. 2 days ago, a man claiming to be acting on behalf of Katherine Andrews tried to access the account. He had the account number but not the password. When pressed, he became agitated. Security had to escort him from the premises. Relief flooded through Kate. "So the money is still there." "Indeed, and quite a substantial sum. It is just over $20,000. The figure stunned them both into silence. It was a fortune by any standard, enough to secure their future and help countless others. "There's something else," Mr. Whitman added, opening a drawer in his desk. "Your father left this to be given to you upon claiming the account." He handed Kate a sealed envelope. With shaking hands, she broke the seal and removed a letter written in her father's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Katie, if you're reading this, you've discovered the truth I could never bring myself to tell you in person." This money represents not my greatest cons, but my greatest attempts at redemption. Every dollar set aside for you came from honest work or legitimate investments. After your mother died, I saw how my choices were shaping your future, and I couldn't bear for you to follow my path. So I lived two lives: the grifter you knew, and the man who worked odd jobs in every town, saving every penny he could for you. The treasures worth having can't be spent, Katie girl. They're the chances we give to those we love to live better lives than our own. This money is your chance. Forgive a foolish man who couldn't find the courage to change his ways completely, but who loved you enough to want something better for you. Your father. Jacob. Tears streamed down Kate's face as she handed the letter to Harrison. All these years, she had been running from the memory of a man she hadn't fully known or understood. He wasn't just saving for me, she said softly. He was trying in his own way to make amends. Harrison read the letter, then folded it carefully and returned it to her. What would you like to do now? Kate took a deep breath. First, we secure the account in both our names. Then we use half to establish a school foundation for children in need. The rest. She hesitated. The rest we use to build our future honestly, the way my father wanted me to. And Sela's. Kate's expression hardened. We return to Benton and face him, with the truth that there never was any stolen money for him to claim. Their business at the bank concluded, they checked into a hotel for the night before beginning the journey back to Arkansas. In their room, Kate stood by the window, watching the city lights below. I spent so many years ashamed of who I was, she said, feeling Harrison's presence as he came to stand behind her. Afraid that my father's blood meant I could never truly be honest. Harrison's hands came to rest gently on her shoulders. We're all more than our father's children, Kate. We make our own choices. She turned to face him. I chose you. Best decision I ever made. Even with men bursting into our wedding and a mad dash to St. Louis. He asked with a hint of a smile. Especially then, she replied, reaching up to touch his face. How many wives can say their husband literally stood in a doorway and refused to let danger take them? Harrison leaned down to kiss her, a proper kiss uninterrupted by gunshots or pressing concerns. For the first time since their wedding, they were truly alone, husband and wife with a future stretching bright before them. The return journey to Benton passed quickly, both of them eager to put the final piece of this unexpected puzzle into place. Upon arrival, they went directly to the sheriff's office, only to find an unexpected scene. Sheriff Daniels looking harried, his office in disarray. They escaped, he said without preamble. 2 nights ago. Had help from outside. Someone knocked out my deputy and unlocked the cells. Sela's couldn't have made it to St. Louis and back so quickly, Kate said, confusion evident in her voice. It wasn't Tucker who went east, the sheriff explained. According to the telegram operator, he sent messages to partners in St. Louis right after they were arrested. Must have had people waiting there already. Harrison's expression darkened. Do you know where they are now? The sheriff nodded grimly. That's the other thing I needed to tell you. They were spotted at your ranch yesterday. My men and I were about to ride out there. Harrison turned to Kate, alarm flashing in his eyes. They think we're still in St. Louis. They're looking for anything that might lead them to the money. They rode hard for the Zeller ranch, the sheriff and 2 deputies accompanying them. As they crested the final hill, Kate's heart sank at the sight of smoke rising from the direction of the property. Drawing closer, they saw that the main house was untouched, but the barn was ablaze, several of Harrison's ranch hands working desperately to control the fire and prevent it from spreading to nearby structures. Frank, Harrison's foreman, ran to meet them as they dismounted. They came at dawn, he reported breathlessly. 3 of them, plus 2 others we hadn't seen before, demanding to know where you'd hidden it. "Anyone hurt?" Harrison asked sharply. "Ned took a blow to the head, but he'll be all right. They locked most of us in the bunkhouse, but Mrs. Townsend heard the commotion and brought her men. They ran off when they saw her coming, but not before setting fire to the barn." Harrison squeezed Kate's hand. "Stay with the sheriff," he instructed before running to help with the firefighting efforts. Sheriff Daniels positioned his men around the property. "They might still be nearby, watching," he warned Kate. "Best stay close." As the men fought to save what they could of the barn, a rider approached from the direction of Olive Townsend's property. It was Olive herself, rifle across her saddle. "They're headed south," she announced without dismounting. "My men are tracking them, look to be in a hurry." "South," Kate repeated, a cold realization dawning. "That's the direction of Benton." "They think we hid something in town," Sheriff Daniels concluded. "Maybe at your boarding house or the school." Kate turned to him urgently. "We need to get back to Benton. Now." The sheriff dispatched one of his deputies to continue the pursuit with Olive's men while he, Kate, and the remaining deputy prepared to return to town. Harrison joined them, his face streaked with soot. "The barn's lost, but the fire's under control," he reported. "What's happening?" Kate quickly explained Silas's apparent destination. "The school," Harrison said immediately. "That's where they'll go. It's where you've spent most of your time since arriving in Benton." They rode back toward town at a punishing pace. As they approached Benton, they could see a crowd gathered near the schoolhouse. Smoke rose from the small building, not the billowing black smoke of a structure fully ablaze, but the gray wisps of a fire caught early. They dismounted amid the chaos of townspeople passing buckets of water to douse the smoldering schoolhouse. The damage appeared to be concentrated in one area, Kate's desk, and the cabinet behind it, where she kept school records and personal items. "They were looking for something specific," Harrison observed, surveying the targeted destruction. "Did anyone see who did this?" Sheriff Daniels asked the assembled townsfolk. A young boy stepped forward, Jamie Wilson, one of Kate's students. "I saw them, Sheriff. 3 men. They told everyone to get out, then started tearing apart Mrs. Zeller's things." "Did they find what they were looking for?" Kate asked gently. Jamie shook his head. "They got real angry when they couldn't find it. The tall one with the scar said they'd tear apart the whole town if they had to." Sheriff Daniels organized a search party, dividing the men into groups to patrol Benton. "They can't have gotten far," he reasoned, "and they're desperate now." As darkness fell, Harrison insisted on taking Kate to the sheriff's office, the safest place in town. "I'll join the search," he told her. "You stay here where it's secure." "They're looking for something that doesn't exist," Kate said, frustration evident in her voice. "How do we make them understand that?" "Maybe we don't need to make them understand," Harrison said slowly, an idea forming. "Maybe we just need to give them what they think they want." The plan came together quickly. Using paper from the sheriff's desk, Kate created a convincing forgery of a treasure map, marking an isolated location several miles outside of Benton. Harrison then arranged for word to spread through town that the schoolteacher's husband had been seen hastily burying something at that exact spot just before their wedding. By midnight, Sheriff Daniels reported that Silas and his men had taken the bait. They were seen heading out to Cottonwood Creek, just where you marked the map. "And your men?" Harrison asked, following at a distance. "When Tucker and his gang start digging at that empty patch of ground, we'll have them surrounded." Kate paced the sheriff's office anxiously. "What if they realize it's a trap? Then we'll face them directly," Harrison said, checking his revolver. "One way or another, this ends tonight." Dawn was breaking when Sheriff Daniels returned, a satisfied expression on his weathered face. "Got them all," he announced. 5 in total, including Tucker. They dug half the night before my men moved in. Didn't even put up much of a fight, too exhausted from all that digging. Relief washed over Kate. Are they secure this time? Judge Crawford arrived on the evening train. We're holding the trial today, no chance for them to escape again. With the charges stacked against them now, jailbreak, arson, assault, they're looking at years in prison. The trial was brief but thorough. Witnesses from the ranch and town testified to the destruction Silas and his men had caused. When it was Kate's turn to take the stand, she faced her father's former partner directly. There never was any stolen money, Silas, she said clearly, her voice carrying through the packed courtroom. My father set aside honest earnings for my future. Whatever he took from you and others during his cons, it's gone, spent or lost years ago. Silas glared at her from the defendant's table. You're lying. Jacob wouldn't have gone straight, not even for you. Kate produced the letter from her father, which the judge read aloud to the court. The revelation that Jacob Andrews had maintained a secret life of honest work, alongside his cons, stunned not only Silas, but many of the townspeople who had only recently learned of Kate's background. Judge Crawford's sentence was severe. 15 years in the territorial prison for Silas, with slightly lesser terms for his accomplices. As the prisoners were led away, Silas paused near Kate. He really did it, he said, something like grudging respect in his voice. Changed his ways for you. Never thought old Jacob had it in him. Not completely, Kate acknowledged, but he tried in his own way. He always said you were the best thing he ever did, Silas added, almost reluctantly. Guess he was right about that. The weeks following the trial brought a return to normalcy for Benton. The school term ended, and summer settled over Arkansas with its characteristic heat and afternoon thunderstorms. Harrison and Kate began rebuilding the burned barn, using part of their newfound wealth to expand the ranch operations. True to her word, Kate established the Andrews Zeller Educational Foundation, providing scholarships for children throughout the county. The first recipients would begin their advanced studies in the fall. On a warm evening in July, exactly 1 month after their interrupted wedding, Harrison and Kate hosted a gathering at the ranch to thank those who had helped them through their ordeal. Olive Townsend was there, along with Sheriff Daniels, Reverend Thomas, and many of the townsfolk who had pitched in to rebuild the barn. As twilight deepened into night, lanterns illuminated the new structure, and a small band played while couples danced on the packed earth floor. Harrison led Kate to the center of the impromptu dance floor. Not exactly the wedding celebration we planned, he said as they swayed to the music. Better, Kate replied, surprising him. Now I know for certain what kind of man I married, one who stands in doorways when danger comes. Harrison smiled down at her. I'd stand in any doorway for you, Katherine Zeller, though I'm hoping we've seen the last of men trying to steal you away from churches. I think it's safe to say that chapter is closed, Kate agreed. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. But our story is just beginning. As they danced beneath the rafters of the new barn, surrounded by friends who had become family, Kate thought about the true meaning of her father's final message. The treasure that couldn't be spent wasn't the money he had saved, it was the life she had built, the love she had found, and the future that stretched before them, full of promise. Later that night, alone in their bedroom, Harrison presented Kate with a small wooden box. A belated wedding gift, he explained. Inside was a new silver locket larger than her mother's. When she opened it, she found not a single portrait but a tiny folding panel with space for multiple pictures. For our family, Harrison said softly, past and future. Kate's eyes filled with tears as she understood his meaning. You think we should include my father? Harrison nodded. Every family has its complicated histories, ours more than most, perhaps, but we honor the good while learning from the rest. Kate placed the new locket around her neck, where it hung alongside her mother's the past and future together. Thank you for seeing the good in me, even when I was afraid it wasn't there. I see you clearly, Kate, Harrison said, drawing her close. Always have, from the first day you arrived in Benton, looking too refined to be a frontier schoolteacher but too determined to be anything else. They stood by the window, looking out at the ranch that would be their legacy. In the distance, they could see the lights of Benton, and beyond that, the vast expanse of territory waiting to be settled. What do you think the future holds for us? Kate asked. Harrison considered the question. Growth, challenge, joy, and sorrow in their proper measures. Children, if we're blessed. He kissed the top of her head. But most importantly, partnership. Whatever comes, we face it together. 5 years later, on a crisp autumn morning, Kate stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching Harrison teach their 3-year-old son Henry how to gently stroke the nose of a new foal. Their infant daughter Grace slept in Kate's arms, untroubled by the sounds of construction, as workers put the finishing touches on the expanded barn. The Andrews Zeller ranch had prospered beyond their expectations, becoming one of the most successful operations in the county. Equally successful was the educational foundation, which had now helped over 20 children pursue higher education. Olive Townsend, now in her 60s but still spry, rode up to the house. "Letters from town," she called, waving an envelope. Kate shifted Grace to one arm to accept the mail. "Thank you for bringing these out. Will you stay for lunch?" "Can't today," Olive replied. "Got a buyer coming to look at my east pasture, thinking of selling off a piece now that I'm getting too old to manage the whole spread." "You know Harrison would be happy to lease that land from you," Kate offered. "No need to sell if you don't want to." Olive smiled. "Already discussed it with him, but this buyer's offering a good price and it's for a good cause, new school building. Your foundation's getting too big for that one room in town." Kate looked at her in surprise. "The foundation is buying your land." "Not directly. Some fellow from St. Louis represents them, Whitman, I think his name was." "Mr. Whitman from the bank," Kate said, the pieces falling into place. The banker had been helping them manage the foundation's growing assets. After Olive departed, Kate opened the letter she'd brought, official correspondence from the State Education Board, confirming approval for the establishment of the Andrews Zeller Academy, to be built on newly acquired land outside Benton. When Harrison came up from the pasture, Henry running ahead of him, Kate showed him the letter. "It's really happening," she said. "The academy my father's money helped build will open next fall." Harrison lifted Henry into his arms. "Your father would be proud of what you've accomplished." "What we've accomplished," Kate corrected him. "None of this would have been possible without you standing in that church doorway 5 years ago." Harrison grinned. "Best stand I ever took." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the Arkansas sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Kate reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a frightened young woman running from her past to the confident wife, mother, and community leader, she had become, all because one man had seen something in her worth defending. "You know," Harrison said, breaking the comfortable silence between them, "I never did ask you a question that's been on my mind since our wedding day." "What's that?" Kate asked, curious. "When those men burst into the church, you weren't surprised?" "Not really. You looked like you'd been expecting something like that to happen eventually. Why did you go through with the wedding, knowing your past might catch up with you?" Kate considered the question. "Because some chances are worth taking, no matter the risk. Loving you was the first truly brave thing I ever did." Harrison took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. And standing between you and those men was the first truly important thing I ever did. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, their children asleep inside the house that had become a true home, Kate knew that her father had been right after all. The treasures worth having couldn't be spent. They were built day by day, choice by choice, in the standing places where love proved stronger than fear. In the years to come, the story of their wedding day would become something of a legend in Benton, how 3 men had tried to take a bride from the church, and a determined cowboy had blocked the door and simply said, "She stays." But for Harrison and Katherine Zeller, it was just the beginning of a much larger story, one written not in the dramatic moments of confrontation, but in the quiet promises kept through all the days that followed.